My name is Sehlile Ndlovu. I'm the Acting Assistant Director in the Town Planning Department. The Town Planning Department is tasked with management of land within the city's boundaries. We look at preparation of master plans and local plans. We prepare residential layouts, that is layouts which demarcate land for the various uses. We are tasked with development control, survey of land, evaluation of land, and also estate management, where we manage council list properties, be it developed properties and also vacant land, which the residents list for various uses. Our talk today will be centered on street naming. Street naming, we're looking at naming of streets and also naming of new suburbs, where I'm going to give you the guidelines that we use. Council adopted the guidelines in terms of Council Resolution of 8 August 1990, and these are the guidelines that guide us in naming of streets and residential suburbs. So these guidelines, they indicate to us what we can use and what we cannot use in the naming of streets. In terms of these guidelines, no living person may have a living public feature named after him or her, except for the president or international leader who cabinet wishes to honor. And then we also consider deceased local leaders and historical events that would have happened, a national goal that we wish to point out, local aspirations and events, natural features, international events, flora and fauna, that is looking at the vegetation that grows within the various areas, and also numericals. By numericals, we mean numbers. We can have a street named First Street, Second Street. And also other lesser known deceased persons, that is people within our communities who have had an impact within the communities. We can also name streets in their names. So as we name the street, there are various categories which I would like to look at in street naming. Firstly, we have naming of suburbs. Naming of suburbs, we name them as they are new suburbs. So these are done at a planning stage before any development takes place. So as the Town Planning Department, we using these guidelines, we also consult widely within the city, other departments and other leaders within the city. We look at cultural leaders to help us in identifying names that we might use. So when we then identify names, we then submit these to the street naming committee. There is a street naming subcommittee which is within council, which is a subcommittee of the town lands, which looks at the names. So as we name the suburbs and the streets, I would like to categorize. We have suburbs which are already developed and they have residents who are already staying in those suburbs. And then we have suburbs which are not yet developed, meaning there are no residents who stay there. And then there are suburbs which are developed by private players. Those are suburbs within private land, which are developed by the owners of those land. So in the case of a developed suburbs, as was the case with suburbs like Mahachula and Parklands Extension, when we are now naming those streets, we have to consult the residents because they're already staying there. So the consultations of stakeholders, which are mainly the residents, are done through the ward councillors. So we inform the ward councillors to inform his constituents, that is the residents, so that they hold meetings and they're expected to hold meetings and then deliberate on the names that they intend to be used. We give them the guidelines to guide them so that whatever names they use are within the specified guidelines. So they will then hold those meetings. After they've agreed on the names or the theme and the names, they would then submit these to council. Once they've been submitted to council, they would then be submitted further to the subcommittee on street naming. And then in the situation of residential areas that are not yet developed, because they will not be, these will not have residents. So what we do is, as the Town Planning Department, we look at our guidelines and consult internally within the departments and also other stakeholders, they will then come up with a theme of names that we intend to use within that setup. And then we take that, write a report, take it to the street naming subcommittee, where it goes to that committee, and thereafter it goes to Townlands Committee for approval. And then in instances where a development is on private land by the private developers, since it's their land, they are given the prerogative to name the streets, but also do it within the guidelines of the street naming. So when they name the streets within their SEPAPs, they also submit these to council. When submitted to council, we first look at them to see that they conform to the guidelines that we have as the local authority. When it has been indicated that they conform to the guidelines, we then also prepare a report to the subcommittee on street naming. So essentially, all names for streets and also for SEPAPs are submitted to the street naming subcommittee for approval. Once this committee then recommends to the Townlands and Plumbing Committee, which will in turn recommend to full council, and full council can then adopt these names. Once these have been adopted, and then they will be used. So you will note from the recent exercise that we had, we have named streets in Mahachula South and Parklands Extension and Mhlangen. The process has been done and has now been completed. And these names, street names, have also been inputted into our system. So meaning that the residents will now start receiving bills which have these street addresses. And once you start receiving the bills which have these street addresses, the residents are encouraged to put the street names and the street addresses on their gates, because this makes it easier for identification of a particular property. It also makes it easier for anyone who's looking for a particular property within a SEPAP to be able to get there. So this is more so for emergency services, the police, the ambulance services, the fire brigade. In the event of an emergency, time is of essence. So where there is a street address, it will be easier for these emergency services to go straight to the property concerned. Without street names, they might end up needing to go and asking people where a particular stand number is. But with street addresses, it makes it easy for emergency services. So the street naming process is a continuous process, as you might by way that there are some SEPAPs that are still not named. For instance, in Mahachula North, we're still in the process of finalizing the street names. Once these are finalized, they will also be inputted in the system, and the residents will be made aware, and they will also be expected to put their street addresses on their gates. Once the naming has been completed, we then liaise with our sister department, the Engineering Services Department, so that we give them the new street names so that they can then put it within their plans and strategize on how the names will then be, on the implementation, so that the streets are named on the ground. I thank you.